Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Advisor Tech Show. My name's Tess Lee. I'm Managing Director of Money Info, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Katherine Waller and Ollie Sayman, who are co-founders of 6 Degrees. Welcome both. It's lovely to have you on the podcast. How are you?
Fine, thanks for having us, Tess.
Good. Well, look, to kick things off, I always start with a similar question just to understand a little bit more about your journey into kind of wealth management and financial advice, your background. So can you each sort of share a little bit about your sort of personal journey into the industry and what sort of inspired you to pursue your career path, or whether, like me, you just sort of fell into it, which I did, but I ended up in a good place. So, Katherine, do you want to kick us off first?
Yeah, sure. So I started, some may have heard this already, I started at university and did finance and philosophy, two
Okay.
very different things. And the reason for that is I was a very opinionated individual, and but I also liked answers. And so finance, I have a passion for. I'm quite quick at maths sometimes when I had more sleep than when the kids allow me. And then philosophy, I wanted to understand people's thoughts, feelings, visions a bit more. So brought the two together. Landed in an accountancy job. Those that know me probably know that I wasn't made for accountancy, and moved from there very quickly into working for, at that point, HSBC, Global Asset Management, back in the days where there wasn't model portfolios, it was stock picking.
Yeah.
And I moved from there into their private bank, so to extend into both wealth planning and lending. I was at HSBC for 8 to 9 years, and then I moved to RBC, where I had the privilege of meeting Ollie. And Ollie and I worked there together for 11 years, in a combination of roles, relationship management, so managing clients, and then latterly in a leadership role, with a mentoring and coaching to junior relationship managers, manage a team, and also the new business strategy for the bank, and growing the revenue base by virtue of that. Ollie?
Fantastic, Ollie. And actually, that combination of finance and philosophy is really interesting in terms of where you're now, in 6 Degrees and your sort of your own philosophy and ethos. So we'll pick up on that in a little bit. But Ollie, go ahead, tell us a little bit about what led you up to meeting Katherine.
No, sure. Tess, I think you mentioned falling into sort of a career. I think that's how it happens for most people, right?
Yeah.
Very few people as a kid sort of want to get into finance as a profession. I very luckily, because it was just before the great financial crisis, I got a job at City Private Bank. So City was a fantastic sort of learning curve, and I was there for 4 years, over which time I was an analyst and then a private banker. But the move to RBC in 2012 was particularly interesting because culturally, RBC was strong, and they hired a lot of people, and it was a big learning curve. And I spent 11 years there at RBC, and over that time, as tends to happen in banks, you start to focus on more strategic roles. You start to maybe get taken away from the client work a little bit.
Yeah.
Brilliant learning curve. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It absolutely led me to realize that there's a lot of work to be done in the industry, and there's possibly another way to approach the wealth conversation. Katherine and I, as she said, we worked together closely for 11 years. We got to know each other very, very well. We got to understand our differences and our similarities, but the differences were far more interesting. We come at things from different angles. We always found greater success when we worked with each other, with clients, and I think they enjoyed the interaction between us as well, because we brought different things to the table and challenged in different ways, and that led us to the opportunity and sort of after leaving RBC, coming together and forming the business. So potted history, that's my background.
Fantastic. And you mentioned there you saw another way to have that wealth conversation, and I feel like that's what makes 6 Degrees special. So tell me a little bit about the driving force behind 6 Degrees and kind of what sets it apart, and this concept of another way to have that wealth conversation, because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of facets to this, and Katherine, if I sort of to kick off and just thinking about the brain, right? And people's perception of what a wealth conversation looks like. And we've noticed over our sort of 15, 20 years in this industry that everyone has a belief, or seems to have a belief, that the wealth conversation is what we think of as the left brain conversation. It's about facts, it's about figures, it's about performance, it's rational and it's logical. And we think that, especially amongst families, the wealth conversation is actually predominantly a right brain conversation. It's emotive, it's creative, it's imaginative, it asks the what if rather than what is. And we feel that you need both sides working in balance with one another. But you need to make the right brain feel welcome. And to do that, to give permission to people to bring the right brain into the conversation, to make it feel welcome, you've got to be really deliberate, because a lot of people have different sorts of emotional attachments to wealth. And it's not an overstatement to say that wealth is a taboo in the UK.
Yeah.
And culturally, the UK is quite specific around that. Other countries don't have the same sort of challenges. They have different challenges. So to make that right brain feel welcome within the wealth conversation, we thought was the key to unlocking it. But Katherine, do you want to cover the other side of it?
So where that then leads you to is that everything, both in your left and the right hand side of the brain, leads you to think about your experience, your background, where you've come from, your relationships with people, your relationships with money, and what you anticipate and want it to achieve for you. But that is really embedded in our own values. What do we believe? Why do we believe that? What do we want? And those values underpin a purpose. And every ecosystem, be it a family, be it a business, has a set of values and a purpose, which creates a culture. And in our minds, without understanding that purpose, really without understanding those values of each person that interacts in that ecosystem, you really can't create the right strategy for someone's wealth. So perhaps that more left-hand side of the brain, how is it structured? How is it invested? What is it doing? How do you see that? The two together, the purpose, the values, the culture, the people, the relationship, and what is it doing? What is that strategy culminating in that connecting wealth with purpose? And that's the real differentiator, because to dig into that conversation, to really understand someone, you have to ask sometimes some difficult questions, as Ollie says, some more challenging questions, not just the know your client, understanding what their income and expenditure is. It's really understanding things that are very emotive, typically.
I would imagine your clients then, from that's probably not, other than I can see it on your website, that's how you promote the business, but it's not something they would perhaps be expecting when they think wealth manager, financial advisor. It's almost as if the managing money bit is kind of an outcome of what the purpose and the values and the desires and the wants and the emotion are. That bit's kind of not the boring bit, but it's just kind of an outcome of that. What's important is getting under the skin of how people are feeling. And I always quote this. I've known an advisor in the industry for a long time, and he always sits down with clients, and the first question he asks is, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Or, that's where he doesn't start with, tell me how much you earn and all that good stuff. And somebody else said to me once, why do we call them pensions or retirement plans? What if we called them your never work again plan? That's much more interesting to people. So how much of it is about the language, and how do you get clients to open up? That's quite a challenge, as you say, Ollie, because Brits are very reserved and we're private and it's a bit taboo. How do you get your clients to open up and to respond to that? Or do they just, do they welcome it? Is it something that they sort of go with?
No, it's a good question. So all of our clients they're all part of what we think of as an ecosystem. So one of our one of our sort of key tenets is that wealth is never, or very rarely, created in isolation. It's usually created and enabled by a supportive ecosystem, and that's usually a family unit, but it's not always a family unit.
Yeah.
And that ecosystem contains different brains and different ways of thinking, and different people with different experiences and different relationships with wealth, and also different influences in their lives. And often because we also want to meet that ecosystem very early on in the journey. And typically you might have the first conversation with what the industry might term the wealth creator. We want to understand that ecosystem, and the second conversation, we want to be with that ecosystem. So typically that's a spouse, but it could be a sibling, it could be a parent, it could be a grown-up child, it could be any number of people. And often that person hasn't been involved in a wealth conversation to date, and often that person thinks differently. And bringing that different view sometimes can really give that person permission and knowledge to become involved. So usually it's welcomed, is the answer. There's also a certain type of client who is more aligned to the 6 degrees philosophy. And when we built this, we realized that if we wanted to be everything to everyone, we were going to be nothing to anyone.
Yeah.
And we needed to work out our niche and establish that. And our clients are quite very purposeful creatures. They have a high affinity with purpose. They're all founded businesses. And tend to think about values and mission and purpose all in one umbrella under their business. So we try and think about that in terms of their personal wealth. That can be a new angle. And they're all quite sort of high EQ people. So they're all typically quite accustomed and comfortable to be talking about feelings and how they feel about it, but they might not have thought about the emotive side of their personal wealth to date.
Yeah.
Thought about it in terms of perhaps their business, perhaps their employees, perhaps their family, but rarely about their wealth. So it's bringing that different lens, as it were. Katherine, did you agree? Is that
yeah, two questions that spring to mind are: how do you feel about the wealth that you've created? Firstly, when you received it in any way in which you did, and now. And the second one is, what's it all for? You know, what do you want from it? What does it enable? What concerns does it create you and other people?
Yeah.
And those are incredibly emotive questions and can open up all sorts of conversations. And the answer can very often be different from different family members as well. And the beauty of having both Ollie and I, who do think differently and hear things differently, importantly as well. You know, hearing and listening are two different things. Not everything that we say is through our mouths. And so by having both of us to be able to reflect, ask slightly differing questions, bring different people in at different times to that conversation, be it in the family unit or externally, really enables that conversation to blossom.
So do you work together on most of your clients as like a unit? So you become almost part of their ecosystem together? I like the use of the word ecosystem. You know, that's really interesting. And I think that's quite unique in terms of your approach and how you're looking after your clients. And I take your point, Katherine, about different voices, different backgrounds, different feelings, different opinions. You know, that's all really valuable, isn't it, to get the best out of that discovery about what that client's really trying to achieve.
Yeah, different life experiences. You know, no one person's background is the same, and no one person's family unit is the same, and we value different things from our own lifestyles, life experiences that you bring into that ecosystem, be it Ollie and I in our business and how we feel about wealth, to, you know, the clients that we talk to, the families that we have conversations with, and even management teams sometimes.
And I guess as a result of that approach, you've kind of got the intergenerational wealth transfer problem nailed from the off, haven't you, really? Because you're not just advising mum and dad, you're looking at their wider family, their ecosystem, the household, so that they're becoming part of that conversation from the off, which is hugely powerful, I would imagine, for you as a business in terms of the longevity of those relationships that you'll have with those families.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's both ends of the spectrum. You know, the average age of our client is between the ages of 45 and 50, so that family. And so there might be young children, but there might also be parents
Yeah.
be considering. And on both sides, you've got a very different relationship. In one direction, it's the responsibility you feel providing, but also educating on that financial experience and education on literacy. And at the other end, it's understanding what do your family and your parents want and how do you support that, and really understand their needs and wants as well. And so it's quite an interesting dynamic to think about both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah.
Now, not everybody will be party to that conversation, but arming our clients with the insight that we have from other conversations enables them to talk more freely in their ecosystems about money.
That's really interesting. And I guess it makes your know your client process rather interesting as well, right? In terms of how you manage that with your clients. It's fascinating. It's so much more than just the money side of things, the finance side of things, the affordability side of things, the what have you got already side of things. It's really about, it's very aspirational, I guess, and understanding, like you said, Katherine, at the beginning there, what's it for? What is all this, what is the purpose of building all this wealth, and where do you want it to lead? And that's really, really exciting, I would imagine, for clients to sit down with you. And do you see, what are the sort of common concerns that clients come up with? Are you seeing in your niche clients, are there patterns that you see there with your business owner clients that are coming out?
So they're all of them are yes, all of them are self-made. So they haven't come from a background of wealth, and they've worked incredibly hard to create what they've created. They're all on the journey rather than at the destination.
Yeah.
So typically they've had an event, they've had a transaction occur, where they have taken some cash off the table and they still have significant exposure to the company they founded. That is very typical for our client base. And none of them really talk about retirement in the traditional sense. They're all incredibly driven, hardworking individuals who will probably always be working in some capacity, because for them, it's not really about the money. The money, again, is a byproduct from the passion and drive and purpose that they've had in their business activities. So that's probably the biggest thing that binds them all. And I think the other thing that happens when you don't come from a background of wealth is it's hard to feel wealthy ever. A lot of them have made the comment recently, haven't they, Katherine, in meetings, that they've looked at their sort of balance sheet and gone, I really can't believe that this is my net worth today. And that's interesting, right? Because the industry positions itself, and by industry, by the way, we say industry a lot, we think of big banks. Okay, right. We don't think of the IFA land, for example, which we have a lot of respect for, and we didn't know much about before we built the business. But our competitors are, broadly speaking, the big global wealth managers.
Right.
And they tend to position wealth management as a luxury item, right? We always joke about, you walk through an airport and you can't tell whether it's a luxury watch being advertised or a private bank. There is a conflation of privilege and wealth. And a lot of the clients that we look after, and most of the people creating wealth in the UK today, are people where privilege is a bit of a turn off.
Yeah.
And it's not about joining an elite club. That is not what they're thinking about. They're thinking about work and values and purpose.
Yeah.
And that's where we're aligning our business. So that's very typical of a 6 Degrees client, which is why it's not for everyone, but it is for the predominantly the main part of the population creating wealth today in the UK.
The interesting thing from that is that therefore, you might traditionally expect that they want to gift that money to the next generation. And perhaps if you'd have thought 20 years ago, that might have been a trend that was really at the forefront. Actually, our clients typically have concerns over impacting their children's lives negatively in such a way as they don't want to disrupt the ambition of the next generation by giving too early, or creating a responsibility around wealth that actually might take away from what they're already doing. So they think differently about how to manage that, how to support without taking away, which is really important, and is really important to therefore how to their purpose, to the next generation's purpose, and to ensuring you get that structure right for them as well.
Yeah, because they almost want to pass on their own values as well, don't they? They've worked hard to get there. They were ambitious. They had a purpose. They don't want their children to lose that. They want
Exactly.
them to have what they've had, but to make their own way in life, right? At the same time. So I totally get that. So look, I'm going to change the subject slightly here and move on to a technology angle, as this is the Advisor Tech Show, and I should be told off if I don't include technology somewhere. But you fairly recently founded back in November last year. And I think as a newly founded business, I know that the adoption of technology and the right technology was really important to you. And you had the benefit, I guess, of avoiding that legacy and being able to go into it eyes open, knowing your niche, knowing how you wanted to work with your clients. So how did you address that, and how has sort of technology helped the way that you manage and interact with your clients? Who wants to start on that one? It's a big question, but
so we knew, on founding this business, we knew that the technology was going to be absolutely crucial, right, to get right, because we believe there exist two sort of gaps in the high net worth market for high net worth individuals. And for us, that means people and families with investable assets of between 3 and 50 million sterling. Below that level, right, for retail investors, there is an awful lot of good quality wealth tech out there. Okay. People are used to doing everything with their phones, and same with their ISAs and pensions and stuff. You can see this stuff. You can see it on apps. When those people become high net worth because they sell a business, they start, perhaps they feel they've outgrown their IFA, or perhaps they feel they've outgrown their accountant who was giving that sort of guidance before, or perhaps they feel Hargreaves Lansdown, sorry to name a name, doesn't meet their needs anymore. So they speak to the big banks. And whether it's, I won't name them, but the big American, British, Swiss banks, they tend to have, this is being generous, underinvested in tech. Right? Why? All sorts of reasons, most of them legacy. It's complicated, but the main thing is they try to do it in-house, and they're not tech businesses. And they're also closed ecosystems, a bit like Apple, right? They sort of want everything sort of closed. And we realized that's one of the biggest opportunities for high net worth individuals. How do they see what they have? Because most of them with big banks currently can't easily. There's usually a human in the way, or a PDF, or multiple PDFs, or multiple password protected PDFs. One of our early investors literally like almost fell off his chair. He's American. He was like, we were like, this is how, if you've got 20 million quid with JP Morgan today, you probably get a password protected PDF for each portfolio. And he couldn't really believe it. In the US, it's a more advanced sort of ecosystem than it is here. So we realized the tech was the biggest thing to solve for and the most impactful one. But then the question begs, why is the tech important? Why is it important to see what you have? And Katherine, perhaps you want to come onto that.
Yeah, so just to round off that point, what that means is that you end up with a spreadsheet. Everyone has a spreadsheet of their list of assets. But that's great, but that spreadsheet is it's in your head, is in isolation to one person. back to that ecosystem, who knows where everything is, and who needs to know what's happening and why it's there. Which means if you are the only person and you haven't got a partnership with someone else, an advisor that's helping you in that, or there's a barrier to getting that information, it creates a question mark around transparency, around integrity, around working with the right team. And so it was really important that we enabled our clients to see their assets in one place. And their entire financial life actually in one place. But not only that they could see it, that they could enable other people in that ecosystem who they want to see it. And it's not necessarily even just about the assets. It might be about the supporting documentation to those assets. You know, we talked earlier about the generations, the children and parents to think about. It's all too often that we hear from our clients that they're unfortunately having to deal with an estate that they don't know where anything is.
Yeah.
And they want to alleviate that problem for their children. And so having somewhere where you can not only see the estate, but also have the supporting documentation of that was really important to us. The flip side to this is clearly on the advisor side and the business side of things, because it's great having something available for clients, but you also need it to have a business that is scalable, to be able to provide a frictionless experience for those clients. And therefore, we were really clear that we also didn't want lots and lots of systems. We wanted a front-end system, we wanted a CRM system to collate the details, and we wanted the back-end system to be able to house the assets. And we needed those systems to talk to one another as well, not least to store the information needed from a regulatory perspective, but also to enable us to scale. So it's Ollie and I as advisors right now. We have a COO from the policies and procedures, and we have a power planner. But hopefully, as we grow, there will be more advisors. And one of the main things for us is to create a frictionless experience for our clients from an onboarding perspective. We recognise that things can be difficult to open accounts still in that industry that Ollie talked about earlier. And we don't want to create that problem for our clients. And so to ensure that we have a streamlined approach, we wanted to have systems that could also support our business to do that.
Yeah.
That could build out that process, that could create tasks to enable people to learn the processes of 6 Degrees, to ensure that we make sure that that client experience for those clients remains frictionless, and the same across 6 Degrees as well.
And that's really interesting, because that's where, I mean, we're seeing, you know, that embedding of processes between the front end that your clients are seeing and your business is so important, because that's what removes the friction, right? And it's all about keeping client but also advisor informed as to where we're at in a process and what's happening and what's next and what needs to be done. And that's almost like a given. Then that becomes sort of a hygiene factor, and then you can focus on the conversations that you're having with your clients, which is where the real value lies for them, whilst the technology does that heavy lifting. And we are seeing more demand around that intergenerational piece, but also connecting in power of attorneys and other relatives. I think that's, you know, not just in your niche, but we're seeing that elsewhere now as well, which is really important. And how have your clients reacted to the technology? How is the adoption of the technology going so far? It's early days, I know, but how are we doing so far together?
I think you know, all of our clients are, I think, what's the word? I think they're pretty overwhelmed, right, with the clarity that's possible. Whereas beforehand, it was a whole hodgepodge of different documents you had to line up together, work you had to do every month to reconcile figures. To be able to see everything in one place for both spouses or family members is a complete game changer. And that is, you know, that is something that I think it probably took clients a while to get used to, first of all, but they're up to speed and enjoy using the app and the clarity it gives. You know, it is a huge selling point of 6 Degrees to be able to provide that level of clarity and transparency. And clients want to understand who's providing the tech that supports it. So we got, you know, this morning we had prospect meetings, right? And in both those meetings, they asked, okay, so, you know, who provides the tech? Is it yours? And we're like, God, no. You know, the most important thing you want, right, when it comes to wealth tech is great encryption and data security. And they're the biggest concerns, right? They're the biggest things that people ask about. And the fact we've partnered with Money Info is important to us because of the size and the track record and the commitment to data security and the data that supports all that, which we can share with clients. So, so I think it's a bit of a learning curve for them because they're not used to having all of this.
Yeah.
And, you know, cloud-based data is also sort of something that they're getting used to as well.
Really interesting that they're asking that question as well. That's really nice to hear because we see ourselves as kind of the Intel inside. All of our apps are branded for the firms that are putting them in front of their clients. We're kind of hidden. We're not precious about that. It's your service. It's your clients. It's you that they should be seeing. But it's interesting to see that clients are interested in who's behind the technology, and that's, you know, that's really nice to hear that they're taking that interest. And part of it is they want to know. You know, they want to know about the information security, I would imagine, and there will be questions around that, particularly if they're business owners, because we all do that. We all need to make sure that anything we're doing is, you know, it has data security at its heart. So that maybe is where some of that comes from, perhaps.
Overwhelmingly, Katherine, sorry, go on.
No, absolutely. It is overwhelmingly one of the largest questions. What's interesting as well, though, is once a client can see and has been set up and is using, is suddenly there's it's eye-opening. What are my opportunities? What are the risks to us as a family? Not least, you know, do we want little Freddie to be involved in the conversations going forward, but little Freddie doesn't know what we've got, so can we open up a little bit of the app available so that they can start that education process? That's a risk to our family at the moment, is we get hit by a bus and no one knows where it is, but actually if we open it up to little Freddie, Freddie knows what's going on. You know, opportunities, well, actually we haven't thought about involving that person in the conversation. We should be going forward. Both those things are really interesting. And again, back to that ecosystem point and left and right brain, not everyone asks the same questions, you know, whereas one spouse, for example, will ask about the protection and security, the other one, it will be, can I contact you through that? I don't know where to get hold of anyone. If something were to happen, what do I do? And the fact that they can just press contact here and contact us and know that we're obviously available instantaneously for them is also a relief. Yeah. In some respects, I think. So it's, people, I think, are using it for different reasons, identifying different things that are important to them through it, as well as the capabilities that it provides.
And what do you think, what does the sort of future look like for 6 Degrees? What is the, you know, what are the sort of goals over the next few years? Are there any new services or initiatives that you're looking to launch? What's the kind of, what does the future look like, both in terms of, you know, 6 Degrees in your proposition, but also the technology side of things? Do you see, because quite often we obviously start small with the technology, then we roll out more and more and more. I know you guys have kind of hit the ground running with it to some extent, but what does the future look like?
I think from the tech perspective, the future is incredibly exciting, right? For obvious reasons. AI is the obvious one, right? You know, at the moment, we would much prefer to find great partners. And part of the joy of being independent is you can work with the best of the best. Yeah. And you find great partners doing interesting things. And the direction AI is going in is really interesting. We think the huge application around AI, and this is something that not that many people are talking about. Actually, there's two key ones. One is around gathering insights from large amounts of client data. Yeah. Whether that is anonymized insights, I add, whether that is as simple as balance sheets or banking information expenditure, that sort of thing, or whether that is insights from conversations, transcripts, etc., from meetings and emails and everything else. I think there's an awful lot you can do with anonymized sets of data. The high net worth demographic is really opaque in terms of clients understanding what other people like them are thinking. Creating significant wealth is quite an isolating experience, right? Because unless all your friends are really wealthy, albeit no one talks about it because we're in the UK.
Yeah.
Selling a business is fraught with difficulties, right? Because it's, who should I tell? Who shouldn't I tell? Even should I tell my children, right? Before you think about your peer group. And with that comes difficulty because you can't really talk about it. And you definitely can't talk about the downsides, right? No one's going to thank you for saying, I've just made £30 million, and frankly, I feel overwhelmed with responsibility. Yeah. That's not a sentence that most people are going to be comfortable saying or comfortable hearing. So to be able to confidently say that actually like 93% of clients who've made this amount of money in the last 5 years have brought up the exact words you're using. They've brought up responsibility and overwhelming feelings and possibly guilt or all sorts of other things
it's interesting you say that. A very dear friend of mine who we've known each other since school, so God, 40 years now, pretty much since we started at senior school. She sold her business very recently, and I said to her, how did it feel when you finally signed? Because it's a very difficult process to go through to sell a business, right? The whole process is fraught with stress and anxiety and, all the due diligence and, you're really kind of laid bare as part of that process. I said, how did it feel when you finally got that signature on the paper? And she said, to be honest, it was the biggest anticlimax I've ever experienced in my life. She said, I kind of woke up the next day and went, well, I don't really know. She was overwhelmed, but also she said it was such an anticlimax. I expected to have this big moment. But I think for her probably is that purpose piece comes in really strongly then, doesn't it? If you know what the purpose is and why you're doing it and what it's all about, that must help with that. But I certainly resonate with that from her experience.
Sometimes that purpose isn't clear though necessarily, and that's where Ollie and I find the conversations actually really interesting. It can become like coaching, like therapy, mentoring, all of things rolled into one, because when you've been focused so long, and you'll know this, Tess, you focus so long on your own business and you're not necessarily thinking about what the monetary outcome is, because there's a purpose behind what you are achieving in that business.
And it's the journey that you're on, and you've always got the next goal and the next goal and the next goal. You're always, driving to scale and build, and that's what it's about when you're in it.
It's all the people that are in it as well, and the responsibility and the culture you're creating. And so you don't think about, well, what happens next? And then all of a sudden, there is all this toing and froing, and you don't actually know if it's ever going to happen. And then it happens, and you're like, okay. And then the next thing that happens is there's a load of money in your bank account. And all of a sudden, there's another pressure because you're like, oh, I've got to do something with that. I can't just leave it there. What am I going to do with it? And that's the bit where actually, we love talking and really understanding and really helping to get to, well, what is it? What's important? And I think that's the bit that is missed. Honestly, because what happens is, and we know this because we worked on the other side of it, is you get loads of inbounds in your LinkedIn and in your inbox. Hi, you've just made this money. Can you come have a chat with us? This is our performance. This is our fees. There isn't that. How do you feel? What's going on? Take a pause. Take a breath.
Yeah.
Like, go for a walk.
And actually, our experience across all of our firms is that what clients are actually buying when they work with wealth managers, financial planners, financial advisors is peace of mind. They're not buying an investment portfolio or a performance report or a suitability document. They're buying the peace of mind that comes from having a great relationship with their wealth manager or planner. And that's clearly something that you guys are delivering in absolute spades. I'm conscious that we're coming towards the end of our time today. This has been absolutely fascinating, and I think your business absolutely sets itself apart. It's a really interesting model, and you've attacked it from such a different angle than we see elsewhere, which is really insightful. So I always ask this question, if you were your younger self or you were talking to some aspiring professionals that wanted to come into kind of wealth management and planning, what advice would you give them if they were looking to enter the wealth management industry?
There's probably a few little things we both think of. I think the one thing I'd say is make sure you love it. Make sure you have passion for it. Then you're going to be the best that you can be. You have to enjoy it, and it's not for everyone. But if you enjoy it and the passion shines through, and you see that, right? You do see that in the market. You see people who have genuine passion for people and purpose and working with individuals and families, and that has got to be the underlying driver over and above technical ability, which has to be there. That's a hygiene factor. That's the left. But the right brain aspect, they have to be there, the passion, the drive, and the desire to do this, because if you enjoy what you're doing, you're going to do a great job. And clients are going to see that, and it's going to shine through in client meetings, I think.
And Katherine, any words of wisdom that you can offer?
Mine would be curious, learn how to listen, learn how to hear, learn to use all your senses, because it's quite intuitive as well. It would be asking questions that don't feel necessarily the most comfortable to ask or to answer, because that will set you apart from those that aren't asking those questions. And the only way you really truly understand someone is to ask them. There's a push, pull, pivot at the right time, and it is intuitive and it is curiosity.
Fantastic. Brilliant advice there. Thank you both. So look, finally, just let our listeners know, if they wanted to get in touch with you guys, how can they find out more about 6 Degrees and what you're all about?
So the website is thisis6.com.
Okay.
And then I'm Katherine at thisis6.com.
I'm Ollie at thisis6.com. And 6 can be spelt anyway, number or letter, SIX.
Brilliant. I love that. So you don't have to keep telling people, except you do tell people it can be anyway. You don't have to tell people.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it.
On LinkedIn, all those sorts of things.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you both so much for today's conversation. It's been really fascinating talking to you and hearing about 6 Degrees and the way that you're working with your clients, and the fact that you're using technology so well as well. I look forward to the success that we'll have together moving into the future as well. I'm sure there's loads that we can be doing. So thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed chatting to you.
Likewise, Tex. And by the way, if you'd like to keep abreast of our journey, we do send out a regular newsletter. So
Okay.
you'd like to be added to our mailing list.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And anyone who's interested can subscribe on our homepage.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, look, thank you, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Advisor Tech Show. If you can, please give us a like and share across your different social medias. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thanks very much.